And welcome to another episode of Where Angels Fear to Tread. I'm your host, April, and on today's show, I have somebody coming on who's rather quite unique, and I have a lot of respect and admiration for his perspective. His name is James Horak, and we'll be getting a hold of him shortly. Yeah, I just wanted to read this, if I can find it, about the author. James C. Horak has been a stumbling block for the New World Order, who offered him Illuminati membership 3 times. Uncorruptible, he was denied a career. Even attempts on his life were made, and a fight is still ongoing. As a last-ditch effort, James set out to reveal secrets that will give the reader a very new and different perspective on the inside machinations of this world and the context in which our world exists, a perspective that pulls in aspects far beyond what many have ever heard of. And this is why I like his work so much. James insists that anomalies like UFOs, EMVs, electromagnetic vehicles, and time travel have to be considered reasonably because they are the hint to the next level up in Earth's development. Development true for us only if we overcome the use of technology to destroy ourselves and our habitat. Are you there, James?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I'm so glad this worked out. I know we've been corresponding for a little while now, and I've been paying attention to your work, mostly by interview, to be honest. I actually, being a procrastinator and a severe procrastinator, putting everything off to the last minute, I didn't actually get to read your book, unfortunately, but I have listened to many hours of interviews that you've had, and that's why I'm interested in what you have to say. How are you today, James?
All right. Very hot day.
Hot?
Yeah. Hottest so far this year.
So whereabouts are you, roughly? Are you in Ohio?
No, I'm in Fort Worth, Texas.
Oh, okay. You did go to Texas. Yeah, I didn't quite manage that detail. So we haven't really gone a lot. Are you familiar with the work of James, or what's his name? Grant Cameron.
Somewhat.
Yeah. He was a local guy who actually had a UFO experience in the 70s, around 76, I think. Anyway, he's all over the internet and into the UFO thing, and but I usually don't cover it because I find there's so much misinformation and disinformation that it's hard to vet that kind of material.
Indeed, and the published ufologists are the worst.
True. And some of the organizations that gather are some of the severest censors I've been hearing, too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, like MUFON, which is a CIA farce. They sold all of their files to Bigelow after years and years of never letting their workers, the people in the field, their volunteers, having access to their own work.
Yeah. It's almost like the same with astronomy, the way they clamp down on that.
Well, Kevin Smith, the late Kevin Smith,
mm-hmm.
who was a very good friend of mine, had a show in which he discussed the office of astronomical telegrams, which requires every astronomer that works for an observatory or the government to, when they make a finding, report it, first of all, to the Office of Astronomical Telegrams, and they'll decide whether it will be published or not.
Yeah, and speaking of published, you did send me a book. Is there a way for people who are not familiar with your work? Do you think that is the essential book to you, or are you working on other things? Because I did have a chance to go through it. I just did not read it.
It was banned in the United States for years.
Right.
And it was sold by Amazon.com in the UK, but they wouldn't sell it to anybody in America.
Wow.
Which told me it was banned. I didn't need any more than that, to know any more than that, but it wasn't promoted, and the people that published it were supposed to promote it, and I doubt they did. So copies were sold in Europe, but, none in the United States until much later.
Right.
But I was so eager to get the message that's in the book out that I was offering it free, the email book free, that I would send to anybody that would send me an email, and I would reply with a free copy of the ebook.
Right. Are you still doing that, or?
Yes, but I would like them first to join me on Facebook.
Right.
I like Facebook for only one reason, and that's whenever you get trolls, you can delete them.
Yeah.
And you can't do that off email forums.
Right. Good point. I hadn't thought of it that way, but...
Yeah. You don't have to use it for social media. You can use it for information. That's your choice. You know, people claim it's this, claim it's that. That's what you make out of it. Now, if you're high profile, they'll probably bump you if you got something political to say they don't like. They're another one of the globalist-run organizations that is probably more involved with the CIA than they are with paying their taxes.
Yeah. And I've always seen Facebook as both an information platform and a way to get a hold of people locally or guests.
If you stay low profile, like, I have on my wall, I have 4,300 and some odd members, but most of them are beautiful women that just, want exposure, and so they apply to be a member on my wall, and the first thing most of them do is say, "Hi, where are you? Where were you born?" and all that. And I just tell them, look, I don't practice, I don't give out personal information, and I don't want to chit chat.
Right.
And so they're bound to, some of them stay. Some of them actually, I don't have anything against beautiful women, April.
But
are you a beautiful woman?
I in a classical sense, I guess.
You have a beautiful voice.
Oh, thanks. So this kind of brings me around to the issue of, people waking up. You actually had a fair amount to say about people waking up and the importance of getting information out there.
A lot to say about it. Yeah, because you might as well give up on the elite. You might as well give up on these college and university communists.
Right.
But snowflakes. It's as much our fault that they're snowflakes as it is theirs, because we weren't watching the store when we sent these kids to school.
Absolutely,
school.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely.
And so, I try to reach them. I say, make up your own mind. Check out the other side of things. Don't be led by your friends or your peers when it doesn't make any sense to you. If it doesn't make sense, try to find something that does.
Yeah, and that's why I have a lot of respect for your work, because you always get in there, like, do your own research and follow it up. Take this as a touchstone to do your own follow up. That was my takeaway from you.
That's an interesting word, touchstone. Are you an alchemist?
Yes, I am.
Well, they have a creed that I follow, and that is that the success of your work depends upon the virtue of your intent.
Right. And also, the reason I say I am an alchemist is because I follow nature.
Oh, yeah. Well, they did too. Of course, a lot of people don't realize that there are things that have survived the Inquisition about their work, and then in it manuals on how to do a number of things, skills and arts that have been lost.
Absolutely, just like the art of magic, right? A lot of the esoteric stuff, at any rate, yeah.
There's some applications that I'm in total disagreement with,
and
most of the Aboriginal people have a view that I share, and that's you don't try to change someone else's luck.
Yeah. Well, for me, magic isn't about people. It's the proper kind is really just good medicine. So that's sort of how I look at that broadly. So if you're going around poisoning people with magic, obviously you're doing bad medicine, right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's not the way.
when you are using something that should pertain to the spiritual, you don't use it against people.
Absolutely. There's different planes, right?
Yeah.
There's a spiritual operation, there's a physical operation, and if they're separated, watch out.
That's why the evil had to design their own god around Satan, isn't it?
Well, and I'm sure it was much more convenient to do it that way too.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only self-serving way to go.
Yeah, and I've talked to a few people about this, and some don't agree that you can divide it into service to self versus service to other, and I guess I can agree with that from the standpoint that you may go from service to self and actually change in your life to service to others. At least that's been my experience in my life, is that I was really ignorant early on, harmful to myself, not really to others, but mostly harmful to myself because I had been basically poisoned with abuse and stuff when I was really young, right? So I had to work all that stuff out, and I think it's a testament to the human spirit myself, but
well, you either grow or you do something much lesser.
So you have said that we are in the 11th hour, right?
Yes.
And I think myself and a lot of the guests coming through this show also agree. And I'm sort of, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I've kind of changed modalities, and now I'm kind of seeing that there's all these people, and well, how about if I just define my tribe, like who I can turn my back on, and they'll tell me if somebody's sneaking up on me, kind of thing, right?
Well, we can't lose our taste for life.
Absolutely.
We can't use that vitality, and if we do, they've won.
Yeah.
It's just like for food. I mean, if you go online, you have to be careful because there'll be people that'll tell you avocados are dangerous, don't eat asparagus.
Yeah.
Your vitality is in new experiences and things that you enjoy, and if you listen to all of that, you see that's the most toxic thing of all, because eventually you become life weary if you let these people get to you.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I've been going over and discussing this a lot with people lately, and I think part of the major ill we have is in where we place our authority. A lot of people see it outside of themselves rather than sort of being their own author, their own authority in their own life, and like taking responsibility that implies, right?
Well, what they have, history is very important, but we have elements that didn't pertain to the distant past. I mean, there are things that are being used upon us that actually impair, in many cases, our own free will.
Yeah, a mentor of mine said recently, and it really struck me when he said this, but he said, how do you put that? You can have true will, but you can't have free will because you don't have full disclosure. And I don't think he was just talking about UFOs there.
It's true, and let's look at one thing that I say to my friends a lot. I say, they talk about disclosure. Greer, Friedman, all these other people have been talking about disclosure like it was imminent around the corner, etc. We'd find today. No way. They want to control everything. They eventually want to admit they're ETs, but they're hostile, so they can have their phony hostile alien attack false flag. And that's the final step to implementing their stinking New World Order. And it's something that Werner von Braun told Carol Rosin.
Absolutely.
He said there were 3 steps that they were going to use to implement the New World Order. First, back then it was the greenhouse effect that we call global warming now. Then it was asteroids, and then it was the hostile ET attack.
Yeah.
And of course, look at it this way, they're in a quandary, and that is that they have killed, they have ruined people's lives to keep ET from being realized as even real. And they have never done anything to really debunk it, because they want to keep that in the background for the day when it comes that they want to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They want to interpret it for us. And so the same people that have done all this evil are not the ones that are going to be the ones to do the disclosure. They're going to let it come from people that cannot be tied in with all that harassment, criminal harassment they did on people that were experiencers or actually saw something that couldn't be earthbound, had to be from elsewhere. So, I mean, they'll stifle them, but at the same time, they don't try to debunk the phenomena as being potentially. But, I mean, now we're beginning to see them loosen up.
Right.
But, I mean, disclosure has already come in Brazil. It came over a months-long flap that left a number of people, an entire village, as witnesses. And the military detachment was sent down to study it while it was ongoing. And 20 years after the fact, the officer that was in charge of that came forward and gave his drawings to ufologists in Brazil. And it became, there was even a documentary here on it. Now they're trying to make it seem like it was hostile. It wasn't hostile. The experience was long-lasting. They probed people, and they took some biopsy. And there were a number of different craft, and they could see them on an island that was attached to the island that their village was on in the delta of the Amazon, called Colares. This was back in the mid-'70s. So, I mean, the results of that was that the government of Brazil and the military turned over all their UFO files to ufologists. So there's been disclosure there. But these ufologists up here that I have no respect for will never tell you about it. They won't write about it. They won't mention it in their email forums or whatever. And I was on one of the more prominent of the email forums, UFO updates, and got kicked off of it twice.
So I mean, to me, this whole thing with we call them star people, but they're just part of our culture. Like, we take them for granted, sort of thing, right? We're not busy trying to prove it.
Well, we have so many phonies. Let me tell you in the first place, what sense does it make that an ET culture would name itself after a constellation its homeland was in?
Exactly.
So the Pleiadians, that's a phony. Andromedaeans, that's a phony.
Orions.
Yeah.
It just goes...
I mean, there are going to be, and every constellation is going to be a number of ET cultures.
Right. And, maybe we could segue into a bit of your understanding of our history and how far back it goes on this planet and the moon and what seems to be Mars, a connection to Mars. First coming here, right?
That's the first place you came to when you came into this system. You were on your way somewhere else, and while you were in travel using the moon as a vehicle, your mother civilization collapsed. And because you knew that you could not get any help if you had problems, you decided to find a more nearby inhabitable planet in a more potentially cultivated or civilized solar system. So you came to Mars, and you'd already made contact with people that were on Mars, a very advanced civilization that helped you. And you were on Mars 50,000 years before you screwed it up. Same way you're screwing Earth up.
Right, and one of the things I've learned from you is that, and actually I've made a great effort in my life to go in the direction of unified mind, unified consciousness, in a very serious way, and I've made some progress, so maybe I can pull it off before the end of this lifetime, I don't know, but you raise an interesting point, and that's people are fragmented. People are basically, by definition, And no offense to our listener, but if you look up the definition of schizoid, you'll find our behavior in there, as far as our psychology and fibbing ourselves and, not always being able to tell what the truth is sometimes.
Well, we'll look at it clinically. The greatest weakness of the human mind is ambivalence.
Right.
The second greatest weakness is that you are suggestible and can be hypnotized and do things that you would not ordinarily do. And these therapists that are lying dogs that will tell you, oh, you wouldn't do anything you wouldn't do if you weren't hypnotized. And that's a lie, because you can be hypnotized into thinking that someone is attacking you or your children, and you'll kill them.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. You can be hypnotized against your will. I'm convinced.
If the hypnotist doesn't give you a cue and you don't come out of it, and the last thing he said was, "You're a chicken," or "You're freezing to death," or "You're burning to death,"
and then they have a heart attack.
You're dead meat.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's like that. It's like that with certain kinds of drugs too. If you get into a certain mindset, you might not come out of it. The so-called bad trips.
Back in the '60s, when I was in school, I walked many a friend off who'd taken that blue dot acid that Leary was promoting. He was a CIA professor. And he was promoting it as something that the government made to use on a whole generation of kids they were afraid of dissenting with the war in Vietnam. And it screwed a whole generation up. And you're looking at some of their offspring now that are pretty well screwed up.
Right.
And you'll never hear anybody say anything that it could have been that not only were neural patterns changed with that bad LSD, maybe genetics were too.
Right. Well, certainly epigenetics would play into that for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something that I've observed that science here hasn't yet discovered. And that I'll tell you, if you can alter someone's behavior, you can bring out low-order genetic potentials to manifest.
Right.
You can. And, of course, they've never even considered this. There's so many things that people on this planet are totally oblivious to. I mean, it just amazes me about, how you can't make electrum.
Right.
The ancients made electrum. You can't make it here. And you can't make it because you won't study anything in depth.
Right. I remember some of your descriptions of that. And I think it's feasible. From everything I've studied in alchemy and everything else, I don't see why it shouldn't work.
Well, there's just a trick to it in order to make it successfully. Now, even Crowley tried to make it.
Mm-hmm. He thought he had it there a couple times.
And, he couldn't keep the gold and silver from separating.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a trick to it. And I'm not going to tell you.
Well, the only thing that comes
petty that way.
The only thing that comes to mind is talking to it, or using some kind of frequency with the voice. That's my first instinct.
Well, it's a metallurgy problem, basically.
Okay.
And to get the gold and silver to bond so that you have a metal that has totally different characteristics, different qualities.
Right. Yeah, I took a few years of chemistry myself, so yeah. I have the advantage of having the chemistry and not just studying alchemy, because I call it alchemistry myself, so.
Well, they talk about white gold, too. And white gold does have efficacy, a number of efficacies that are related to health. But the Rothschilds that have a lot of it really don't want you to know, because they're afraid you'd use up a lot of the available gold, because in making white gold, the gold you use is not recoverable.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
You know that gold is a perishable metal, don't you?
I would think.
They'll say it's a non-perishable metal.
Well, I think it's just relatively speaking, it's non-perishable, but everything's perishable as far as I know.
That's right. Well, you can salute it in Aqua Regia.
Yeah, but it's just a matter of time, I would think. But I wanted to ask you, actually, when you gave your description of history of humanity, you tend to use this language where you're not including yourself. So I wanted to ask you about that, if you wouldn't mind maybe going into that a little bit today.
Well, the first time that I ever admitted what I had found about to be true about myself back in the mid-'70s, when I had an occasion to learn it, was when I was dealing with Dr. Bergeron.
Right.
And I'd read his book, and I was talking with him about the EMVs, and he knew that they were in the rings of Saturn, and that they were finishing the A-ring while he was writing his book.
Mm-hmm.
So we were talking, and I said, they're going to be found in the sun, tasking. And he said, how do you know that? How do you know that? And he kept on, and finally I said, because I'm not from here. And of course, after that, I couldn't deal with him directly. I dealt with his colleague, Casey Dawkins, very wonderful and lovely lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still in touch with her, but it was difficult because he was a very well-established scientist, very well-liked, and he stepped out of all of that to tell the truth about what he found in the rings of Saturn, and to triangulate its size by what had been found by Cassini probe.
Yeah, and those things are gigantic.
And when he divulged that they were the size of North America, but they've been seen in the sun, and they're at least that size. They react with the solar flares and prevent them from becoming, to the extent, CMEs. And if a CME does escape, they will protect the planet from it.
So what is the origin of the EMVs? I know we're talking about perhaps a technology that's beyond humanoid, perhaps. I mean, if it can be called a technology.
It can be called a spiritual technology.
So that implies order and hierarchy.
It implies God.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So that would be the only origin possible for the EMVs, because even the highest civilizations of ETs cannot approach them. They work with them. It's necessary to use EMVs when you are creating the highest form of technology, which, like some of your astronomers take note, which is to be able to control the star in your system and determine the rate of progress on planets that are hosting sentient life. And if you don't, it's controlled here, but it's not controlled by civilization. It's controlled by the EMVs that protect Earth from CMEs.
Right. And who knows what the construction on Saturn was about, or what's up with that, what they're doing there.
Well, Saturn is a workshop.
Yeah, workstation. A workstation, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
You know what the rings are made of?
I can't remember. I know they thought it was ice, but it's not ice. It's...
Oh, no, it's matter.
Yeah.
And when they finish and they have a new planet that they want to terraform, they use that material. There's a dump of it in the Nevada desert now that's being exploited, and Vietnam wants it all because it'll reverse the damage that Agent Orange has done, the dioxin in Agent Orange, to their soil.
Okay, just hold that thought, please. I just want to let our listener know. If you're just tuned in, this is CKUW 95.9 live in Winnipeg. I'm your host, April, and this is another episode of Where Angels Fear to Tread. And on the line with me live from the U.S. is James Horak, who is one of the most intriguing speakers I've heard perhaps in the last 10 years. And you offer information for humankind, believing we are in the 11th hour kind of thing, right, James?
Yes, you are. You've exceeded that, really.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there have been 6 extinctions before this one.
Yeah, and a lot of us have our prophecies. There's a few of them that I find relevant, not all of them, because some of them are time constrained, and the time has passed for some of them, I think. But one in particular is called, you've probably heard of it, it's called Warrior Rainbows, or Warriors of the Rainbow. And this is where it gets weird, because you look to the Bible, and the covenant with God is spelled out as a rainbow. When you look at these warriors, it's spelled out with a rainbow. When you look at the left and the LGBT thing, A, B, C, D, F, G, they've hijacked the rainbow. People are trying to hijack the rainbow, and there's some really sacred stuff associated with that, is what I'm trying to say.
I think that if you look at a rainbow, that the best thing it could depict is unfettered light from the sun, because you have every range of color. You put them all together and you get white. And if you'll notice, the sunlight today is white, whereas when you were a child, don't you remember it was more yellow?
Oh yeah, I totally know. I know all about that. One of my guests is not the head, but the switchboard for a lot of people who are doing sky observations.
Well, the reason for that, April, is that with the chemtrails and with the nuclear tests and everything, they've killed a number of microscopic little critters that are in that atmosphere that were filtering that light.
Right, and with 5G...
When you're getting white light, you're getting the full range. And it's detrimental to us, because we've lived here, as far as our ancestors and us, we've been on Earth about 280,000 years. And so we, almost 99% of that time, we've had the yellow light, the light that was filtered. Now we're getting a radiant light that can be damaging.
Absolutely. There's reports from all over the world of things being fried, and plus with the pollution coming from the planes, you've got aluminum buildup in the roots of the trees, right?
Well, that's part of it. Aluminum, strontium, and barium.
Mm-hmm.
And you know that there was a movie made back 2007 called Toxic Skies.
Oh, okay. I seem to remember
and
that title.
It was a Hollywood movie, and it was banned.
Yeah.
Because it gave out a lot more information that they wanted people to know then. And, of course, even now, there are people that think they know all about chemtrails, but that movie shows something, shows a mechanism, an ulterior motive in the delivery of those chemtrails that could lend itself very well to depopulation.
Well, and a few other things, too, such as the transhumanist agenda with the nanotech and this kind of thing. Self-assembling nanotechnology, you know. Yeah, Clifford Carnicom seems to be the only one I am aware of who's actually done seems to be legitimate, but we don't have the results reproduced elsewhere. So I don't think we have enough to go on with the nanotech myself. At least,
well, we've got the potential 100 ways to denude the planet of life.
Right.
Or if we want to do it fast, to just blow it up.
Well, or just kill it.
Mastered.
Just kill every tree, and there goes our life, everything we eat, right?
Well, you know that they were using Corexit in the Gulf of Mexico, which killed it. the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
But did you know that they were dumping it on the Atlantic side of Florida?
No, but I know
Yeah.
there's spots where they were dumping it. Yeah, Florida got
Oh,
some
they
of it.
weren't just dumping it; they were spraying it.
Yeah.
And they had near these communities where these people had retired and had these little rich yuppie brokers for their children in New York City that would benefit off of getting their retirement as an inheritance early.
Yeah, and that's what I had heard about that, but I only heard
The same ones that knew that they could place their investment and make money off that platform going up in smoke.
Yeah,
They knew exactly when it would happen. If you know when an event like that's exactly going to happen down to the day, you can make a ton of money on stock market, commodities especially.
Absolutely. And there's a way of making money that most people don't think about, and that is if you have control of all the welfare payments and you delay it for a day, you can go to the casino. It's delayed the
and
payment.
in the past they have done that. They don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they used to. I carried mail for 6 years.
Yeah. Or just have the bank issue it late,
Banks do that. Look at how long it'll take you to transfer money into, you can do that with PayPal and nothing flat.
Yeah, or Western Express.
But with a bank, if you go to a bank, there's charges. There's the conversion to, if you're sending it at Germany, there's a conversion to the EU, then they charge you for that.
Yeah, it was going to cost me. It was going to cost me $30 just to send someone $100. A few months back. It was insane. So I just sent it Western Union or whatever that is called.
There are countries that have these scams. That the large part of their GNP is catering to people that are bringing money into the country with these scams, romance scams.
Right.
This is mostly centered in 3 countries in Africa. One is Ghana and one is Nigeria. And they won't take money that's sent by any other means than Western Union. So because it violates, it'd be mail fraud.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm not kidding.
So, I guess the other thing I was curious about is, in listening to a lot of what you say, a lot of it is not, let's say, common knowledge, but just out of curiosity, if you don't mind my asking, where do your ideas come from, and have you had them for more than just this lifetime?
I've always had access to genetic knowledge into the collective consciousness. I just didn't know it until 74.
Oh, okay.
Something happened in 1974 that put everything together for me. And that's when I learned what I was supposed to do.
Okay. So, if I can sort of summarize that, it's you are acting, I think you've said it this way, you're acting on behalf of the EMVs?
I'm a liaison between the EMVs and extended communities, which are all over the universe.
Right, and I guess that's the other aspect too, is that you have a view of life in the universe that we don't get access to, largely. Not just because of classification and all that, but it's the general population's mindset. It just doesn't allow us to, I can see some of it, but I mean, people don't even bother to exercise their imagination anymore. It's really sad. Well,
there's some things I can do. I mean, I can't do them for myself, or I would have healed the wounds on my ankle a long time ago. Some people say I have a Christ obsession, but I don't. I just had to make a deal to stick around past the cutoff date of Earth's destiny.
Right. I recall something to that effect. And so when was the turning point when you knew that the sun was not going to fry the earth and that the EMVs were still in position or in effect had an influence?
I've known about that ever since knowing what they are, and since '74.
Oh, okay.
But there was no point to talk about it because I didn't have anything to point to. I don't talk about anything I can't point to, because even then, no matter what proof you have, proof doesn't exist on this planet. Nobody believes anything.
Right, right.
They don't believe anything, really. They don't actually believe anything. And that's because, their mind is split. They can betray themselves in their dreams. I can't dream. I envy you guys, but I can't dream. I used to think I dreamed, but I was doing something else. I wasn't dreaming.
Yeah, I don't. For about 14 years now, I haven't dreamt. So, yeah, I had a real serious health issue, and I recovered from that over the past 10 years, and then.
What happened to you?
Well, apart from my life being a train wreck up until about 15 years ago, where I broke my back, and I was told I would never walk again, and I needed surgery, and I might walk. And 3 months later, I was involved with Tai Chi Chuan, and I just used that exclusively. I didn't go back to the doctor, and it took me a year and a half, but I was able to walk again and actually go on to African dance, contemporary dance. So it was mind-blowing. A life turned my whole life around. So yeah, I think we have everything in us, quite frankly, and
it's there. You just don't access it.
Mm-hmm.
There are two things that. One is you have a split consciousness, and there's a reason for that. Number two, the Earth's environment is not the environment that you evolved in. It can't hold helium. It doesn't have a constant gravity wave signal. And you have a moon that shouldn't be there. That moon is not uniform. It has vast cavities in it.
Yeah, it seems to be somewhat hollow.
Yeah, you have engines on Earth that are working with machines in the moon to keep it in orbit around the Earth, because you guys, originally when you decided to come to Earth, you moved it from being around Mars, and that killed Mars, to Earth, because unless you have a mantle reacting with the moon, you can't have a stable environment, and the Earth at the time was not stable. So in order to be able to make Earth friendly, you put the moon in orbit around the Earth with the help of those people I talked about that were native to Mars.
Right.
And they're the source of the Hall of Machines that Tesla talked about he could communicate with. Did you know that there were green canali until 1938 on Mars?
I didn't know they were green, but I know they were canali. Yeah.
They were green because they were fed with water from the poles.
Right.
Yeah. And sometime around 1938, two flashes occurred at both poles, one flash at each pole, and it reduced those polar caps so that canals couldn't be fed, but they're artificial. And there are a lot of artificial ruins, and even on the other side of Mars, there are some things that, towns and cities that still have some inhabitants.
Right, and I just wanted to say, I know we've been all over the place today, and but that's sometimes how I like doing the show. It kind of gives many different sampling sort of thing of where this conversation could go, and I really hope, I really wanted to thank you, James, and I really hope we can do this again and fill out some of these areas where that we're touching on today, because You have such an array of your perspective is such that it's like there's nothing stopping you from seeing it, seemingly, for some reason. So I'm very curious about that and intrigued. So I wanted to give you the last word here, though, James. And if you could, for our listener, let them know how to get a hold of your work and hear more from you. I know you've done a lot of interviews and whatnot, but you have a website and also a thought for the day, if you will.
All right. We have a blog, myself and my colleagues. It's called EMVs, EMVS info .blogspot.com. And if you join, befriend me on my wall, my Facebook wall, and you send me an email, I'll send you back the ebook of my book.
Which I fully intend to read.
Okay. You'll have more questions.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. But I've been totally, not to make excuses, but I have had like 8 new guests and you amongst them. So it's like I'm booked way ahead and I'm trying to figure out a pattern that works. And so I'm getting some very interesting people, including you, on the show, and I'm really appreciative. So I'll let you finish off.
Well, I have the best hope for Earthbounds. You have a split consciousness, which is unique, and the universe would love to see you succeed and survive.
And that's your thought for today?
Yep.
It's a good one. I like that because
Thank you.
a lot of us are working towards that very end, trying to find the means to it. So I really wanted to say miigwech and thank you so much, James Horak. Check out James's work. You've done a lot of interviews, and I find those very interesting. And I'm really hope you'll come back and we can do this again.
All right, April.
So
I'd be happy to.
Let's stay in touch then, and I want to wish you a really good rest of the day. And miigwech again, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye. And there we have it, folks. Yeah, a little bit all over the place there, but I think if we can have James back, we could talk about some very interesting things. And all I ask is that you suspend your disbelief long enough to check out, to note some of what he's saying, and to look it up and see if there's any evidence for it. I know I've done that over the past at least 5.5 years. I don't know if I was aware of James before, but James Horak, yeah, you can find him on Facebook, and he will send you his book, which is The Siege in the Davis Mountains. It's quite interesting. I've gotten into it a bit, but being a procrastinator, what can I say? and extremely busy at this time of year, too. So, but we'll have him back. I intend to stay in touch with him, and we shall see how it goes. And thank you so much for tuning in.